All right, welcome to the conversation at the Guns and Ammo Buzz podcast. We have four people. It's going to be on screen here. I'd like to introduce, of course, Tom Beckstrand, the rifle and optics editor for Guns and Ammo. We've got Jim Tarr is the handgun editor for Guns and Ammo, and Jack Oller, who is the managing editor for Guns and Ammo. And this is also his first podcast appearance. So we all let's welcome him.
Shouldn't he be wearing a white dress if this is his first time?
Jim's always got a good one, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, hey, we're here to talk a little bit. We're going to do a SHOT Show recap of the 2025 SHOT Show in Las Vegas. We all just got back from it. It was the 47th annual SHOT Show. The first, does anybody know where the first one was held at and when? Got nothing? Crickets? No. Jack, how about you?
I think that's before my time.
Well, it was. It was in 1979 in St. Louis. So 2025 is the 26th SHOT Show in Las Vegas. And the NSSF has reported that 54,000 industry professionals attended for the 2025 show, which is actually a little slightly down from the 55,000 reported in 2024. There were 2,850 exhibitors across the Venetian Expo and the Caesars Forum for a total of 14.1 miles of aisles. Did it feel like that to you, Tom?
Yeah, it did. But the one thing about when they expanded into Caesars is it actually makes it possible to walk through the aisles. Up until then, I just remember the log jams that were in the aisles, and you hustle from one meeting to the next, and it's like, if I get one more cart full of swag that I have to trip over, like I'm going to lose my mind.
How about you, Jim? Did it feel like it was down? Could you see there was a little bit less of an audience? Or?
Well, remember, we are still on the upswing after the COVID years. So right. I know I didn't go to the 2022, or is it 2022? Yeah, I didn't go to the 2022 show because they were still requiring masks, but I've heard that that was a ghost town and there were tumbleweeds blowing through the aisles. Since then, right. It's looked pretty good. But as Tom said, because they opened up the Caesars Forum and that added probably 30% more floor space, something like that, the way it used to be first day of SHOT Show, literally you couldn't fit through the aisles at any sort of normal human speed because it was wall-to-wall people. And you had to wait until day 2, 3, or 4 before you could get anywhere on time. And it's still a really healthy crowd. I think the only reason why it might be down is because so much now is available online, and some people are posting instantly or within a few days. I mean, we've only been home for a couple of days, and this is going to be going up in a day or two. It used to be you'd have to wait for press releases from SHOT Show for a week or two from different organizations to find out what was there. And thanks to the wonders of modern technology, people no longer have to do that, no longer have to wait.
So for us, SHOT Show looks like a bunch of meetings. And of course, even if you block off meetings every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes, it's impossible to get around to see everybody and to see everything. So Guns and Ammo is unique because we actually kind of split up our responsibilities, and we have a lot of separate individual meetings with a variety of manufacturers throughout the business, and that way we can touch more and see more than everyone else. So one of the purposes of this conversation is we're going to talk a little bit about the different handguns and rifles that we came across, and even optics and some other topics, and perhaps establish some trends for 2025. Now, one thing I wanted to start off with is before the actual trade show event starts at the convention center, there's usually a day or two of range events that happen. And leading up to this, we had a range event at Beretta. They had one in Boulder, as well as Smith & Wesson had one. And then, of course, the largest range event is the Media Day at the Range there in Boulder City, which, typically we have an annual breakfast for the Guns and Ammo staff. And it's kind of a nice way to kick off the rest of the year. But Did you guys hear anything back from the range days? Do we have a report to speak of?
I mean, typical of range days, you know, it's going to be a good weather for a range day is going to be cold with a lot of wind, and it stayed true to form. But I mean, you know, range days, it's great. You're only going to get a handful of rounds out of each gun that you get a chance to shoot, and we're fortunate in that we see most of them before SHOT Show anyway. But it was a typical range day to me. A lot of walking, a lot of talking, a little bit of shooting.
I think this is the.
Well, I got to go to the Beretta event the day before the industry day at the range, and that was cool. It was a little smaller, a little more intimate, you know, if you can call 150, 200 people intimate. But considering Beretta's the oldest firearm company in the world, there's no shortage of people that want to get in there. They showed off a number of cool new products, one of which we can't even talk about because they didn't even, it wasn't even for the show. It's not going to be ready for a while. They had their their 80 series pistols now back chambered once again in 32 ACP, you know, which is what James Bond originally was upsized to, from the 25 ACP up to the 32 ACP, which hits like a brick through a plate glass window, according to, I don't know if that was in the book, but it's definitely in the movie, which is just ridiculous when you look back on it. But I mean, and that honestly, you know, we've all been in the industry for years and years and years. And the Beretta event was the first time I actually shot a suppressed shotgun. I've never done that before. And it's just, it's cool. I want to see somebody put one of those suppressors on a short barrel shotgun, because the darn things are so long that on a regular full length shotgun, it's feel like a Revolutionary War infantryman with your long rifle. But it's so neat and different. I mean, how many people get to do that? We're lucky. We are very lucky.
Hey, your thoughts, Jack, before we interrupted you?
No, that's all right. Yeah, I think at the very least, this is the second year in a row where the day prior was the perfect day. Like, no wind, temperature was ideal, you know, sunny day. And of course, the actual BD day at the range itself, that's when we got all the wind. That's when you never have enough chapstick at SHOT Show, because you go to the range day and you get hit in the face all day with that wind, and then you never really fully recover that. At least I didn't, you know, through the rest of the show. But attendance seemed a bit down at the actual media day at the range, especially compared to previous years, but still a solid turnout out there. And you know, you don't get to do a ton of shooting. You get just enough ammo for kind of like a taste, and but then, you know, that's how you get excited for reviews down the road, right? You know, some really cool standout products at the media day at the range. I think for us, you know, we stopped by the Silencer Central booth, and they have the new Banish 9K super compact 9mm pistol suppressor. We got to shoot that on a select fire Glock, and that was pretty cool. I think that was the standout product for me at the range day.
So when you're talking about select fire Glock, we're probably referring to the Glock 18. And in terms of the suppressor you're talking about, this is only like a 4-inch suppressor that's about 1 inch wide, which isn't much wider than the slide itself. So you don't even need suppressor height sights to run this thing. And it is supposed to be, you know, rated to about 124 decibels or hearing safe. Really impressive for such a little can. And if you had an open-ended holster for it, it's theoretically something you could even carry on a pistol. What do you think about that, Jim?
It's titanium. It's 3D printed. I can't remember exactly how long it is, but it's only 2.7 ounces. It doesn't feel real. It feels like a toy. And because it's so light, you can put it on a pistol, and you don't need a booster. It just runs. Even though it's so small, because it's 3D printed, they were able to fit 4 baffles in there. That and of the things that were standouts to me at this show, the technological advances were what stood out. And part of that is the 3D printing of titanium. Magpul's got a metal injection molded knife, you know, it has a MIM blade, things like that I just find fascinating, and you're not quite sure where things are going to go, but I'm excited to, watch them get there.
Well, on the note of the 3D printing, and Tom, perhaps you can speak to this. You review a lot of suppressors for us, but 3D printing, does it not allow the manufacturers to manage some complicated design parameters that can't be done with traditional machining? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I think of the first part of the industry that'll see, that'll be revolutionized by 3D printing will definitely be suppressors. And we're already starting to see it. The 9K Banish that Jim talked about is a big deal. And not having to put a Nielsen or a booster in your pistol. That's, you try to put a suppressor on a pistol, and that's where all the problems seem to come from. But you're seeing it on rifle suppressors as well. Shorter, lighter, and, with objectively quantifiable data that says it's quieter. And so, yeah, and it's all because they can do really complex shapes with 3D printing that we haven't been able to do previously. And on some of the obscure corners of SHOT Show, companies that are networked in and doing kind of R&D for the special operations community, you're seeing some really unique designs specifically for suppressors that have, frankly, just amazing capability.
So another thing about SHOT Show is the after dark parties. Now, there have been some legendary ones. We can all probably remember the old cry parties and things like that became sort of legendary in our business. But this year, a lot of it seemed to also just celebrate anniversaries. And my favorite this year was the Aimpoint 50th anniversary party, which was held at Area 15. And that's a little bit of a out of this world art deco kind of place. It was an interesting location, but really a well-attended party to celebrate Aimpoint's 50th anniversary. And we saw Per Sandberg was there, son of Gunnar Sandberg, and all the important people, if you will, over from Sweden. Really a blast. And I also had a good time with Browning Winchester folks over at Black Tap, and got to celebrate with our friends, Rafe and Shondi over there. But it seems like it was so packed, you just could not walk around, and it overlooked the Venetian Lagoon outside. It was kind of an interesting setting. How about you guys? Jack, you're the young man here. Did you party anywhere, have any good times at night?
Yeah, Smith & Wesson had a wonderful event at Machine Gun Vegas on Monday night there. You get to go. Of course, they paid, so I'm always going to take advantage of shooting machine guns on somebody else's dime. And, really cool assortment of machine guns at that facility. And then, of course, once you finish shooting, then you can have the beverages, very careful about that. Of course, we're not not combining the two, but yeah, really cool. Highly recommend, if you're in Vegas and if you've never shot a Machine Gun Vegas, they have a really nice assortment, and not that expensive. Of course, it depends on the cartridge and the firearm that you're shooting, but really cool experience.
What was your favorite machine gun there?
Oh, I never have a bad time with the old Tommy gun. It's just, I've never seen anybody shoot that and then not just have the biggest grin on their face when they're done. That thing is it's just classic, right? Man, if I could have one, NFA pre-ban item, it'd probably be the Tommy gun, just because it's fun, and also not that expensive to shoot. You can get some pretty cheap bulk 45, but man, it's those are getting more and more expensive to own, unfortunately.
How about you, Jim? How was your week?
Oh, I had a great week. I mean, it's the world's largest gun show in Vegas. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't gamble. I'm happily married, but I love the spectacle of Vegas. And I was actually invited to a number of after show parties. And this year, for one reason or another, I actually wasn't able to go to any of them. So I was still doing stuff, but I was never able to go to any of the. I was not worthy to get an invite from Aimpoint for that higher echelon editor party, apparently, that you were invited to. But I know like SDS Arms and Agency Arms and another of other companies banded together and invited people over to Pro Gun Vegas, and they had some giant drone shoot, which I really wanted to go to and I wasn't able to, which I've been to events like that before out there. And you're out at night, you're shooting, there's explosions, there's been helicopters with miniguns. It's
wild.
It's never a bad time. Honestly, the most memorable after-shot party I've ever been to was a Glock party back maybe 10, 12 years ago. And they had the Boston Police Gaelic column. So these are all the Irish cops in Boston, which there's more than a few. And this is their musical column. And they marched into the room and they were playing drums and bagpipes and whatever, which drums and bagpipes in an enclosed space gets your attention. I understand why they did it on the battlefield.
Yep. How about you, Tom? You partied it up anywhere?
Well, so, evenings at SHOT Show are kind of a combination of you got dinners, right, where you go and hang out with industry friends and connect. And then, there's always the parties. Probably the one that I went to that's kind of an annual tradition for me is the Night Force. They have a get together at Top Golf. And what I like about that is it's kind of indoors, it's kind of outdoors. And it's just a chance to sit and talk to friends. One of the big draws of SHOT Show is the entire industry is in one place for a week. And so you can connect with friends and stay on top of, hey, what's here at the show and what's going to be at next year's show and have those kind of conversations. And so I really enjoyed that.
So looking back, 2024 was a tough year for manufacturers. I heard that a lot. Finances it was tough to make it in the black for a lot of companies. But what did you guys feel like was a sentiment for SHOT Show in 2025? Is it going to be the worst year ever? People optimistic with President Donald Trump in the White House now? Jack, let's start with you.
I think we're seeing some interesting trends in categories, right? One that stands out for me is thermal, right? A lot of different thermal companies are getting bigger now, especially Pulsar just launched a new sister company that is vehicle mounted thermal imaging devices.
Right.
Some really exciting stuff. Dark 30, that's right. Yes. Very exciting technology coming out on that front. And so I think, the country as a whole is, we've seen lots of budget friendly firearms. And so now it's the expensive firearms that are growing in popularity. And there's more of a market on more expensive optics and more expensive, like thermal is one of the growing trends that I saw at SHOT Show. Lots of different companies coming out on that front.
Jim, did you see any trends?
Well, yeah, gone are the days when, due to political concerns, companies could just make anything and it would sell and fly off the shelves. And we've seen a bit of a thinning of the herd. The number of pistol companies, the number of companies that make AR-15s has gone down. And so in the current market, the companies that are innovating, that are offering something a little bit different, either in style-wise or in technology, they're the ones that seem to be getting the attention. Not necessarily the more expensive things, although that's part of it, but just ones that are offering something a little bit different. And then again, I think that we are on the cusp of seeing a lot of really interesting things happen due to changing and emerging technologies, 3D metal printing, new uses for metal injection molding, things like that. And maybe we can hope that there'll be some import restrictions lifted this year, which will, I know all of the AK guys are bemoaning the loss of inexpensive overseas ammo. If we can get an administration that maybe addresses that will, more ammo equals cheaper ammo, which means some people that wouldn't otherwise buy guns will buy guns. And so that will invigorate other segments of the market. It's all interconnected.
How about you, Tom? What kind of trends did you see? And is there
as far as optimism? Yeah. So as far as state of the industry 2025, what I I would say is cautiously optimistic. Is kind of the attitude that I was picking up on from the bulk of the manufacturers I talked to, as far as, coming products for 2025. There's some unique designs out there. I mean, I think, the one of the biggest buzzes of the show, at least from in the rifle world, was Seekins. They completely redid their rifle line, kept prices the same, and brought every relevant feature that you could want to have in a bolt action rifle. They did.
Right.
And so, there's the company called Outlier. I like to find like a small company at SHOT Show that kind of like,
right.
If you can find one small up and comer that you're like, okay, that's exciting. To me, that's kind of a big deal.
Right.
And
what emerging products are coming from Outlier?
Well, so it's kind of hard to describe. It's a bolt action rifle, but there's no receiver. So there is an extended barrel extension that bolts to the chassis. Obviously, the bolt head locks into the barrel extension, and then there's an aluminum collar at the rear to keep the bolt in line. And then, it's like a carbon fiber wrapped barrel, but it's the carbon fiber wrapped barrel is the reflex portion of a suppressor. Yep. And the best part of all is rifle, optic, and suppressor all retail at just under $2,000. So to me, I was like, I'm interested. Too early to tell, but highly innovative.
All right. So that's going to lead me into my next series of questions. And Jim, let's start off with you. The most talked about handguns. Now, I've got a short list here I'm going to hit, and then let's see where you go with it. One, I think the Ruger RXM, which is the Ruger by Magpul collaboration. Everybody was asking, is this a Glock clone killer out there? And then I've also got Smith & Wesson no-lock revolvers out there. And, it's important for me. I was actually about to buy one of these classic Model 36s, and now I see one is without the internal safety lock on there. And I'm thinking to myself, let me just put that on standby and perhaps buy the one without the internal safety. I'd like to hear your thoughts on these.
Well, we've on this Buzz podcast, we've already talked about the RXM, and it's big news. And a lot of people hadn't had a chance to get eyes or hands on it until SHOT Show. So yeah, it was getting a lot of attention, and I think it really signifies a changing of the guard. As I've said before, it used to be when you talked about the 1911, you didn't talk about the 1911. You talked about the Colt 45 because Colt owned that, and now. I think the Glock pistol design has slipped away from Glock, and it's becoming the new 1911. So many people are making Glock pattern pistols that are as good, or in many ways and features better than the ones coming from Glock, that the landscape is changing. And I think that's a good thing. More, I'm a big capitalist. Competition is always better, and I think that we're going to see some interesting things on that side.
Well, with the Ruger RXM, one of the particularly notable features about it is that it's got a removable chassis that's not too difficult to separate, and we're familiar with removable chassis from what's come with Sig Sauer, and now other companies are starting to do the same thing. Is this now sort of the trend for future handgun development? Is the ability to put on unique color grip modules or change out a caliber and a barrel and slide assembly?
I think so. I think I don't think all pistols are going to be doing that, but I think an increasing number of them are, because it allows much more customization on the behalf of the user, the end user, so that you don't need to buy a second gun if you want to swap out the frame, because it's not the frame, it's the grip module. You can, you've got the fire control unit or whatever the gun company happens to call the trigger unit in the gun. You can swap out the grip module. You can swap out different slides and different barrel lengths, all without having to worry about any legal paperwork or anything like that. And that's one of the ways that the industry is going to keep itself healthy, is allowing people to customize things that they already have for a little less money. And then you mentioned the Smith & Wesson revolvers. I'm on Facebook. I've got two boys and they're in their 20s, and they do not go on Facebook because that's where old people are. That's people our age. But the old people on Facebook, one of the things that they were really excited about was those Lipsey's exclusive revolvers without the stupid, unnecessary, and un-American frame lock in it that Smith & Wesson is finally doing away with, that they never should have had to begin with. But that's personal opinion and whatever.
And those Lipsey's exclusives were the Mountain Hunter series specifically. So that's calling back to a classic name in the Smith & Wesson lineup. I'm pretty anxious. Now, Jack, I'm going to bring another one over to you. It seems everywhere there were double stack 1911s. Kimber, of course, has the 2K11, which has been out on the market already, but we also saw more affordable alternatives as well from like SDS Imports. You've got EAA double stacks as well. I mean, we're seeing them at all price points. Tell us a little bit about what you saw from that 2011 segment.
Absolutely. Well, Springfield Armory's got some line extensions for the Prodigy series. Those are double stacks at very affordable price point. I think they're around the $1,600 to $2,000 range. But then on the other end of that, Staccato got a lot of attention at this SHOT Show with their new HD series. That I think is going to be very popular for them. They're kind of the brand that all of their double stack 1911s are judged against. Interesting stuff coming out of their front. But then to your point, EAA, plus there's a lot of other Turkish manufacturers, and that's another trend we're seeing in the show, is that Turkey is doing some really, they're stepping up their game. They've got some really high quality machining going on over there. And so we're seeing, really, really affordable products from Turkey. They're getting down to sub $1,000 double stack 1911s. And so, today's the day to get into the double stack game because you've got options, to say the least.
Let me jump in here because you mentioned the Staccato HD. The interesting thing about that is that it feeds from Glock pattern magazines.
Right.
Except it doesn't ship with actual Glock magazines or Magpul magazines. One of the cool, interesting things at the show is Mekgar, the kings of OEM magazines. They introduced a new Glock magazine, a flush-fitting metal steel Glock magazine that uses the factory polymer mag release in your gun, but it's a flush-fitting 18-round magazine. And I think that that's going to basically kill all of the Magpul sales of Glock magazines. Because we in the industry know that basically, I guess Mekgar has been working on it for 2 years, and they wouldn't have introduced it until it was perfect. And basically, those of us in the industry that know Mekgar products just assume it's going to be 100% reliable. So all of a sudden, your Glock 17 or 34 or whatever it is has an 18+1 capacity, and then they're going to be introducing a flush magazine for the Glock 19, which ups your capacity from 15+1 to 16+1. So why wouldn't you do that? Again, it's sort of like, it's a niche thing, but it's also companies are figuring out how to do more with the same or less. Like, magazines the same size, and all of a sudden they're adding capacity to it 40 years after the magazine design came out, which I just think is fascinating.
Tom,
sorry, Eric.
Sorry, I'm going to jump over to Tom here real quick and kind of watch our time. Lever guns, of course, they've been hot for the last few years. They seem to be continuing in 2025. we're seeing line extensions come from Smith & Wesson, from Marlin under Ruger's ownership, as well as Savage and their Rimfire Revel series. And from Smith & Wesson, of course, we saw an introduction of a new Stealth Hunter in some other calibers, not just 44, but you've got 45 Colt in there. I'm pretty excited for that one as well. And do you see the possibility of a 9mm or 10mm lever gun coming out? Of course, Henry's already introduced a couple of these interesting innovations, but what do you see with the lever gun landscape?
Yeah, I think, the final frontier for lever guns is the 9mm or the 10mm. And, we know manufacturers have been looking at it for a while, and I think, some have tried. But I think this year's the year. I think we'll see one of them. And the big problem, of course, is just detonation in that tubular magazine. You got to make sure that people can put any 9mm or 10mm round in the mag and not have it detonate under recoil from bullet noses hitting primers.
10mm seems perfect for a lever action to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be easier to load. The thing about rim cartridges is stuffing them in that tubular mag. Sometimes they get hung up on the loading gate a little bit. So when you go to a rimless round, they just slip right in there like a bar of soap. And then, you get hard cast, flat nose, loaded up hot, and, it'll be fun to see.
Hey, Tom, did you happen to see the Henry Supreme? It's their new rifle in either 223 or 300 Blackout. And I imagine suppressed, it would be a joy to shoot.
Well, and it takes AR mags. So it's, for your band states, or even, the thing that I like about a lever gun is that you can put a suppressor on it and it's as quiet as a bolt gun, but it's faster. You can work the action more quickly. And now with that Supreme, you can reload it really quickly, because that's historically been the problem with a lever gun, is they are slow to reload, but that new Henry fixes that. So it's AR mags, which everybody's got. It's cartridges that everybody's familiar with. It's a lever gun, which is legal everywhere. Threaded muzzle, takes a suppressor. I mean, that's kind of a compelling little package for sure.
All right, I'm going to take this conversation to budget guns real quick. Now, a lot of attention was actually over at High Point's booth. They have, and I'm going to look at my notes here, the 995P and 4595P carbines, which are now pistols without the stock. And my mind immediately goes to what it's going to be like to SBR these. What do you think about this, Jack?
I mean, I suspect we're not going to see a ton of people SBRing, guns of this nature, but I haven't had a chance to get my hands on them myself yet. What makes you think people are going to want to SBR them, considering that they're at a more affordable price?
Well, I don't think now that pistol braces are back on the menu, and the gun is, you can either buy it with just a pick rail on the back or with an AR style receiver buffer tube and a fixed brace. Knowing the price point and High Point's usual customers who are looking to not spend much money, I think most of them, the vast majority of them, are going to keep it in a pistol configuration. Barrel's been shortened from 16 or 16 and a half, whatever it was, down to 13 and a quarter, which is as short as they could go, and not have to start messing with various things on the receiver. And I love they had one on the booth where the stocker brace on it was basically a shovel handle in true Russian Mad Max fashion, because why not do that? It's just great. And the thing that surprised me is that until they did it, I was shocked that it hadn't been done already, but the brace thing was sort of up in the air for a while. And now that that's settled down, there are a number of companies that have jumped back into that, and I'm glad to see that's actually going to open up sales in those long pistol versions of long guns that have been a little tame for a while.
On the topic of budget guns, a few popular ones I noticed. Taurus came out with the GX2. Rock Island Armory had an STK series. Their families extended to include pistols of different sizes, as well as an ultra model, which has got all the bells and whistles on it. And of course, Hi-Point takes the Yeet cannon or the YC series and makes it in 380 now. Jack, did you have any observations on the budget gun side?
There's a lot of them out there, to say the least. But I did like that GX2 quite a bit. Our digital editor Antonio just wrote that up for the April issue of Guns and Ammo. So really nice review of the GX2. That one's interesting because it takes a lot of lessons from the GX4 series, and yet it brings them to an even lower price level than the GX4. I think it's a good $100 less than the GX4 series, but it still seems like a solid shooting concealed carry, everyday carry style pistol. But you're out the door for around $250, give or take there.
Right. So,
I think,
Jim.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the guns which might qualify for the budget gun list, it's got an MSRP of $399, and maybe it was the pistol that got the most attention at SHOT Show, was KelTec's PR57.
Yeah,
it's a 5.7 by 28 chambered gun, 20 rounds, and it has no detachable magazine. It's fed by proprietary polymer stripper clips through the top. And they specifically did that to make it hopefully legal for sale in some of the banned and restricted states. They actually have their lawyers looking into that. And I love the fact that, provided that the states don't lose their actual mind, and places like New York, New Jersey, California actually pass laws specifically against that pistol, it allows someone to actually have a handgun on them with a 20+1 capacity, because you can charge it to 20+1, and the 5.7 is a pretty darn decent defensive cartridge, as long as you don't have to shoot through any sort of intermediate barriers. And the problem traditionally with 5.7 pistols is because the cartridge is so long, the guns tend to have large grips and longer barrels, and the KelTec is like 40% lighter than the rest of them, and because there's no internal magazine, the grip is actually remarkably slender, and it's got a 4.64 inch barrel, so the thing is actually very carryable. So
Jim, is that a rotating barrel?
Yes, that's the fascinating thing about it, is they wanted to get the barrel as low as possible. So it's actually, the barrel slightly rotates when it locks up right at the end, almost like an AR-15 bolt. And then because they wanted the barrel as low as possible, instead of a large single recoil spring rod underneath the barrel, they have two really skinny ones to either side, and it allows the barrel to sit down almost in between them. So it's a really, really low bore on that gun, helping to reduce muzzle rise when you're shooting. It's just a fascinating. I wasn't quite sure how to think about it, how to wrap my mind around it, but anyone who says a pistol like that with no detachable magazine isn't suitable for defensive carry, better not recommend anyone carry a revolver, because how is that any different from a revolver's slow ability to reload and much lower capacity?
Interesting. Now, on the topic of cartridges, since you brought it up, Tom, the 7mm Backcountry, you've got tons of experience. You've gone to Africa with it. To me, it was the most talked about new cartridge introduction all over SHOT Show. And you even heard competitors to Federal talking about it and asking us, hey, do you think this is viable? Has it got any legs? What's it like against the 277 Fury, or the military's new 6.8 cartridge with its steel casehead design, or steel alloy casehead design versus, a brass case, and brass versus Federal's new Peak alloy steel case. What do you think about that technology, and what did you hear on the floor?
Most telling for me was hearing from competing ammunition companies that they hope that it is successful, which I was like, what? Just because of the capabilities that come with it. Like you get on the internets And there's a lot of hate out there, all from people who have never fired a round of it, never touched it, never seen it, never done anything with it. They just want to be angry. I get skepticism, but the reality is that PEEK alloy allows us to do things with cartridges that we've never been able to do before. And no, it is not the same thing as the cheap steel cased ammunition coming out of the Eastern European and old Soviet Union. That's night and day. Probably one of the best lines I heard is, beer cans and airplanes are both made from aluminum, but it's not the same. And that applies here with that PEEK alloy. Is it steel? Yes, it's some kind of alloy. It is reloadable. They're figuring out exactly the process. They're just optimizing the process and the powder selection for it. But everybody wants shorter barrels because everybody wants suppressors. That's a trend that I absolutely firmly believe should continue. At least suppressor use. Like, none of us are getting our hearing back, so let's not lose it in the first place. But I think it's the way of the future. Now, is it going to be the SIG case design, or is it going to be the federal case design? I don't know. When you start delving into the details of who's doing what and how it works, there are advantages to both, but there are also disadvantages to both. And so the market will tell ultimately, the market will determine ultimately which one is successful. But it is a capability that's here to stay. You talk to rifle manufacturers and they're like, you might as well, if you got to redesign your action, you should do that now. And the only reason they have to redesign is for the proof loads. When your standard pressure is 80,000, your proof load's at 114. And if you put 114,000 pounds in a regular old action right now that was never designed for anything close to that, and touch one off, like, you're probably going to be able to get it open, but it's going to walk with a limp for the rest of its life.
I would like.
Well, Federal already released a long list of companies and brands that are working to develop rifles specifically to chamber the 7mm backcountry. Sorry,
some companies have been working over a year.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to jump in on this because this is one of those technological advancements that I just find fascinating. And I talked to both J.J. Reich from Federal about this and Bill Geisley. So J.J. Reich said that the military is hugely interested in this case technology because everybody in the military is running basically SBRs with suppressors on the end. And if they can run 5.56s out of an 11.5-inch barrel that all of a sudden is giving them carbine or even rifle equivalent velocities, the military is very interested in that. And so the question is because they're running at 80,000 PSI, what is that doing to port pressure? What is that doing to bolt speed? Well, I was talking to Bill Geisley about this, Geisley Automatics, and I haven't looked, but he says that there's apparently a video on the internet of him. They've been experimenting with 5.56 cartridges using this new case, and he was shocked that apparently all of the pressure magic is happening up closer to the chamber, because he said he had magazines stuffed with standard pressure rounds and the PEEK alloy pressure 5.56 rounds, and the bolt speed was unchanged. The ejection pattern was unchanged. So he thinks, and Geisley partnered with Federal to put out their new, I think it's their King Hunter bolt action rifle in 7mm backcountry. So they've been in sort of on the ground floor in this new case technology. And so I would expect to see a lot of new things with that. So apparently there isn't a huge amount of pressure change at the port and bolt speed, but as Geisley said, what that extra pressure and that extra velocity will do to barrel life, nobody knows yet.
Now, so you guys often see our readers bemoan introductions of new cartridges. Why do we need another cartridge when ammo manufacturers don't supply me with enough ammunition for cartridges that already exist? That's a common complaint that you might receive from somebody. But there are two other cartridges that we need to address. And Tom, I'm going to start with you here. One is the Hornady 338 ARC, and two is the Winchester 21 Sharp. Tell us why they exist, why our readers should care.
338 ARC exists because the special operations community wanted to be able to hit targets at 200 and 300 yards with subsonic ammunition, like regularly and reliably. And okay, well, I'm not a ninja, Well, pest control. I mean, I've been looking for a subsonic bolt action rifle that was accurate out to 300 yards for a while, and this was the cartridge that was designed for it. So if you're into that, that's why that one's there. 21 Sharp exists because it allows us to take a lot of the infrastructure developed around 22 long rifle and shoot like bullets with big boy jackets on them. Yeah, we could do it with 17 HMR, 5mm Remington. But now we've got all of the infrastructure, it's economies of scale. There's 22 long rifle equipment everywhere. This allows us to use that same case, just redesign the bullet, slightly smaller bore, and voila. So it's inexpensive and you get the consistent terminal performance that comes from having the jacket on your bullet.
That's an interesting point you brought up, the inexpensiveness of it. We're talking I heard someone actually came out, how about the old 5mm Remington? The thing is how much that ammunition costs if you actually find it on the shelf. And with this 21 Sharp, it actually is the same price as almost 22 long rifle. Yeah. But you're getting performance rivaling the 22 Win Mag at 100 yards, but you're getting increased accuracy due to the new flat base design of that bullet. Right. And tell us a little bit about what Winchester did in order to stuff those cases, because what I'm finding is you can take that 21 Sharp and it'll go into 1022 magazines, rotary magazines. They'll fit just fine, which opens the door for a whole bunch of existing platforms to easily accommodate a more accurate cartridge, or at least a cartridge that has more accuracy potential out of it.
Right. Well, accuracy, that one's going to be, where you see the advantage is there's a slight velocity
qualify the bullet.
Yes, it all depends on what kind of bullet you want to shoot. So, the 22 has got that little heel on it because the sides of the bullet have to sit flush with the case. So it's got this little heel that allows it to sit inside the case, and that's what keeps the ammunition together. But with that heel, you don't always get an even push from behind, and it's just a complicated process. And so they're like, look, let's just put a traditional jacketed bullet in there. And, the caliber came out as 21. And you leverage all of the infrastructure that already exists. So okay, well, what does it do? My 22 doesn't. Well, you're never going to have a copper jacketed 22 long rifle. And I don't care. Well, if you shoot rabbits and squirrels and pests, sometimes those bullets do weird things if it's a soft lead blob. So me personally, I like the idea of having a jacket on it just to give it to some consistency.
Sure. Well, and I know they're making some solid lead-free options as well.
Sure. Well, and that's another good reason to have it's a cost-effective lead-free option.
Yeah. So we're going to transition again, this time to optics. So again, I don't mean to be picking on Tom here, but a lot of things going on here. I'm going to start with the rifle side since I picked on you, Tom. EOTech came out with a new VUDU Compact 3-9, and this guy is short. It does not look like your traditional 3-9 by 40 scope. Can you tell us a little bit about it, as well as then lead into Leupold launched the VX6 HD series with also a new CDS SZL2 turret.
Okay, so EOTech 3-9, what makes that possible is in the last 10 years, when you make optics compact, it's hard to keep image quality. But what's happened in the last 10 years is the consumers have spent so much money on scopes that materials, glass that used to be obscenely expensive is now fairly commonplace just because there's so much of it being made. So you've got better glass options, and that allows them to shrink the package and maintain the optical quality that we're used to seeing. So that's what's going on with that 3-9. I mean, that thing's so small. I think it's the same as all of your aftermarket Trigicon mounts work for it.
6.8 inches long, and it uses a mini ACOG mount.
Bingo.
Wow.
So on an AR-15, that's going to like a general use AR-15. Man, that thing's going to be a great choice.
It's got a good eye box too and a decent reticle.
Yeah. And then that Leupold, what that is a toolless zeroing turret system that allows you, because, you know, a lot of times if you change ammunition, you've got to change your zero. And then it's like, okay, now I got to go find the tiny Allen wrench that's somewhere in my shooting bag or glove box. And that usually involves several minutes of searching and maybe some profanity. And they're like, hey, like, you know, we don't have to do that anymore. So it's a toolless re-zero system. And of course they refresh the coatings and optically, you know, spruced it up a little bit, because Leupold can do that. They have all their engineering in house, and no one's going to tell them that, hey, you can't improve an optical design. So that's what's going on with that new VX6.
So earlier, Jack, you mentioned thermal optics were one of the emerging trends and interest, and people's ability to actually afford thermals. You remember just like 15 years ago, to buy a thermal was like $15,000 to get into this game. And now we're seeing thermals that are easily attainable. Now, to a lot of people, they're still going to be expensive. You know, when you look at some of those pulsar thermion optics, you know, those can be in the $3,500 to $5,000 range, depending on the features that are included in it. But also what I picked up on, and let me know, Jack or Jim, did you see that new Holosun thermal pistol sight?
Yes.
Jim, we went to the Holosun booth. Unfortunately, the battery had been run out by the time we got there, so we were not able to actually see it in use. But you know, definitely an interesting concept, right? I think, Jim, you and I agreed that this is not something that is going to be like a tactical must-have, but it's like, hey, we're exploring technology. Where is this going to lead us 10 years from now? And that's what's really interesting about the site. But unfortunately, we didn't get to actually look through it at the SHOT Show just yet. The battery life is going to be pretty short on that new optic. Jim, what do you?
Well, Jim, what do you think about this? Is it viable?
Well, I think they said battery life is 20 minutes or something like that. I love the fact that it's basically more a proof of concept than anything else. They've shown that they can do it, that they can make it small enough to fit on a freaking handgun. And I don't know why you would need a thermal on a handgun. Maybe if you're in law enforcement or military and you're using your handgun to search a building or something like that, or you're hunting at night and you want to use a handgun as opposed to a long gun. But you know, never ask why. Only if you can.
Well, hey, one you don't have to ask why about, and I'd like to get all of y'all's input on it. But Aimpoint, how about that new COA and the A-Cut mount? You know, that was a widely kept secret. All three of us have been involved in watching this thing develop for almost a year now. And Glock, of course, gets the first crack at releasing a product for the A-Cut and supporting COA optic. But let's get your feedback here real quick. Jim, you start us off.
I think it's interesting. It took a company with the horsepower and gravitas of Aimpoint to finally get Glock to make steel rear sight standard on their guns, because that's how the actual optic locks in at the back. And the interesting thing that you don't really realize until you're looking through the sight is basically the window, the area on the COA optic is pretty much the same size as the Acro, even though the overall size is significantly smaller, again showing technological advancements. Because of the way it's set up.
I actually believe it's a little larger it
might
appears.
Even be.
Even for the side, it looks like the wall is thinner than the Acro.
Yeah.
And by the way, the COA is no more expensive than the Acro. It's actually a really affordable optic. I believe it starts at MSRP suggested is like $599, which is on point with where the Acro.
Yeah. Optics are getting better and either staying the same price or getting cheaper, which I love to see it.
Yeah. So Tom, you know, the A-Cut allows the front of the COA to hook or to actually hook into the slide, kind of like a dovetail or a wedge in there. And then it's secured and pinched down by the rear sight, which has a couple of screws on there. And I'd like to make a note too, which I talked to the folks at like XS Sights and say, hey, this would be an easy rear sight to develop for it, because you really are taking some of your standard rear sight assemblies and simply screwing two screws through it. the sight doesn't absorb any of that recoil. So, a lot of pistol-sided optics out there, of course, the screws that attach it to an adapter plate or directly to the pistol, that's the point that ends up absorbing a lot of recoil. Can you tell us a little bit about what this design is going to do to the red dot sight optic industry? And could we be seeing another year or so after the exclusivity agreement between Glock and Aimpoint expires? Are we going to see this suddenly flood the market on a bunch of different pistols? Could we possibly see the narrowing of footprints? Maybe we do away with some of the other footprint designs out there and focus on the A-Cut because of its security and ruggedness. What do you think about that?
So I mean, I hope so, because the beauty of that A-Cut is all of the shear load goes directly to the slide instead of those tiny screws, which you mentioned, and that's the right answer. And it doesn't take very long for someone who's new to red dot optics to understand why. You want 2 to 4 tiny screws handling all your shear load, or do you want the whole steel mass of the slide absorbing it? Aimpoint beat the brakes off those things in testing on 40 Smith & Wessons just to like, well, we got to know. And so, I think obviously this first year it's going to be exclusive, but I wouldn't be surprised if that footprint becomes standard across a lot of pistol manufacturers. And my hope is that other mini red dot optic manufacturers will make use of it as well, just because it's the right answer.
Yeah. Jack, how about you? You've worked for an optic manufacturer before.
Well, I will say that, I think, the concept is fantastic. I think it will take a lot of market share as far as like optic mounting interfaces go. But there are so many RMR cut slides out there now that will never fully replace just because there's already so much. You got the Delta Point Pro, the Shield RMSC pattern, and the RMR are the big three when it comes to mounting interfaces. And because they're already so prevalent, we'll never fully see every, manufacturer move away from that. But I think the A-Cut's going to take a healthy amount of market share in the next couple of years.
Awesome. All right, guys. So again, just to call back attention to, we've got Burris celebrating an anniversary with a full field, 50 years of the full field 2. The full field 2 is introduced here at SHOT Show. On Ed Brown's side, we have 25 years of its Cobra Carry, and they're celebrating it not only with the 25th anniversary Cobra Carry model, but one with a dual caliber kit that lets you go between 9mm and 45, something to get excited about. And I'm sure I'm going to mess up the name here, so feel free to correct me. Cellier and Balot is celebrating 200 years of making ammunition. And I believe we're going to see some exciting celebratory products that result from these. And I'm also curious to see, I haven't really seen anything yet, but this is the 80th anniversary of World War II, and the last year that we're going to be able to honor those veterans who served in World War II, because I believe, by the time we roll around to the 85th anniversary, unfortunately, most of them are going to be lost. Most of the veterans are going to be lost in World War II. But what are your guys' thoughts about the anniversaries I've just talked about, and any other anniversaries that I perhaps may have missed myself?
Well, time marches on, I love to see companies celebrate 25th and 50th and 200th, and in the case of Beretta, I think we're past 500.
No,
Right.
next year is Beretta's 500th.
Okay, okay. Well, they're newbies. They're wet behind the ears until next year, and then we'll say they're officially old. But to me, it just shows the longevity of the firearms industry and the innovation. Firearms have been around for a long time, and hopefully they're around for a long time to come.
I think one more worth adding, Eric, is next year will be 250 years for the United States, which I think that
Go
right,
America, baby.
That's a big one. And so I'm really excited. I want to call out that we'll be going to Guns and Ammo TV. We'll be going to the Cody Firearms Museum, and we're going to be taking a look at their extensive, Revolutionary era war firearms, that they have. They have an amazing collection there. And so starting next year, we're going to air, we're going to interview Danny, the curator of the Cody Firearms Museum, and we're going to put on a really good show celebrating 250 years for the United States. So my personal favorite anniversary, I think, of the ones we talked about today. So that's a big one.
Jack, I'm going to say that's a great one to end on, and also an opportunity to plug. If you aren't familiar with what Jack's talking about, be sure to tune in and watch these guys. Both Jim and Tom are co-hosts on it as well. Guns and Ammo TV, available on the Sportsman channel. You can also see it on the Outdoor channel, and you can always find it on My Outdoor TV, where it's a great streaming service. Be sure to sign up for those, and don't miss the conversation as it continues. And be sure to visit us on gunsandammo.com. I appreciate all you guys joining the Buzz podcast here. This has been a fun conversation. Thank you for bringing back your thoughts and ideas here from the 2025 SHOT Show. We look forward to the next one.